Avoidants don't run from you because you're wrong for them, too emotional, too intense, or too loving. They run because loving you exposes a part of themselves they've spent their entire lives trying to avoid. Their instinctive retreat is not a reaction to your presence, it's a reaction to their own unhealed internal world. You're triggering something ancient inside them, something formed long before you arrived, something rooted in childhood experiences where closeness felt unsafe, needs felt shameful, and emotions felt overwhelming. When you show them real connection, real affection, real emotional presence, you awaken all the fears they've buried under layers of independence and emotional shutting down. Inside an avoidant, the fear of intimacy is not intellectual, it's biological. Their nervous system interprets closeness as a threat. Their emotional memory treats vulnerability as danger. So no matter how kind, stable, or loving you are, their body reacts as if you're standing too close to the wound they try to protect. You are not the source of the fear, you're simply the person who got close enough to activate it. And once that fear activates, everything in them shifts. Their voice changes, their behavior becomes inconsistent, their availability fluctuates, their presence evaporates. Not because their feelings disappeared, but because feelings themselves became overwhelming. Avoidants run from themselves, not from love. They run from the version of themselves that feels needy, attached, or emotionally exposed. They run from the vulnerability that your presence naturally brings out in them. When they feel affection, their instinct is not to move closer, it's to retreat into the emotional shell that kept them safe their whole lives. They are not rejecting you. They are protecting themselves from the risk of emotional collapse. Because if they let themselves love you fully, they fear losing the identity they built on self-sufficiency. They fear becoming dependent. They fear caring too much. They fear that if they open their heart, pain will follow. They fear the emotional emptiness they grew up with repeating itself. And that fear is stronger than the comfort you offer. People often assume avoidants don't feel anything deeply. The truth is the opposite. They feel ***, too deeply ***, but they have no idea how to regulate those feelings. When someone awakens love inside them, their emotional world becomes chaotic. Their thoughts spiral, their heart races, their defenses spike. They don't retreat because they feel nothing, they retreat because they feel times everything, times all at once. They are overwhelmed by the intensity, confused by the vulnerability, terrified by the depth. They want connection, but they don't trust it. They crave closeness, but they fear losing themselves in it. Their running is not rejection, it's self-preservation. And this is why they run even harder when they meet someone emotionally safe. You think your love will calm them, but your emotional safety exposes their lack of emotional tools. Your consistency highlights their instability. Your openness reveals their avoidance. When they see what real love looks like, they fear they cannot live up to it. They fear they will disappoint you. They fear you will expect more intimacy than they know how to give. They fear you will eventually see how emotionally unavailable they really are. Instead of risking failure, they run toward what they know: distance, isolation, emotional numbness. Not because it makes them happy, but because it makes them feel in control. The heartbreaking truth is this: avoidants are in a lifelong battle with themselves. They want love, but fear it. They want closeness, but panic when it arrives. They want to be held, but flinch when someone reaches for them. Their running is not a reflection of your value, it's a reflection of their internal war, a war you never caused, and a war you cannot win for them. If you want, I can now explain. Keynote 2 inches 600 words ***. The reason your safe, stable love triggers an avoidant's deepest fears is because it confronts them with everything they've spent a lifetime avoiding. You think your consistency will calm them. You think your patience will reassure them. You think your gentleness will make them feel loved. But what actually happens inside them is the opposite. Your emotional safety doesn't feel safe to them, it feels dangerously unfamiliar. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't hurt them, abandon them, or overwhelm them. They don't know how to receive love that is stable, honest, and emotionally present. For someone who built their identity around emotional self-protection, real love isn't comforting, it's destabilizing. When he meets someone who offers the exact kind of love he always wished he could receive, his nervous system doesn't interpret it as comfort, it interprets it as threat. He has been conditioned to associate closeness with disappointment, emotional needs with shame, vulnerability with danger. So when you offer your heart openly, his subconscious doesn't see generosity, it sees exposure, it sees risk. It sees the possibility that if he leans into your love, he may have to face the emotional parts of himself he has avoided for years. That is terrifying. Your emotional safety becomes a mirror that reflects his emotional limitations. Your stability highlights his instability. Your capacity for closeness highlights his fear of it. Your emotional maturity highlights his emotional avoidance. And instead of inspiring him to rise to your level, he feels overwhelmed by the pressure. Not because you're demanding anything, but because just times being loved by you, times makes him feel like he has to become someone he's not ready to be. This is why avoidants often pull away when they feel most drawn to you. Their body starts sending signals of emotional danger, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because the connection feels too real. They never learned how to trust love without expecting loss. They never learned how to rely on someone without feeling weak. They never learned how to be emotionally open without fearing humiliation or rejection. So when you show up with love that is honest, adult, and emotionally secure, it shakes their entire internal framework. Your safety pressures them without you ever saying a word. Your consistency demands emotional presence. Your openness demands self-awareness. Your patience demands reciprocation. Your intimacy demands vulnerability. He is terrified because he senses that being loved by you requires him to show up in a deeper way, a way he has never practiced, never felt safe doing, and never believed he was capable of. You are the emotional environment he always needed, but never learned to survive in. So instead of relaxing into your love, he becomes tense. Instead of communicating, he shuts down. Instead of leaning in, he creates distance. To you, that distance looks like rejection. But to him, that distance feels like protection. Your kindness doesn't soothe him, it disarms him. Your affection doesn't reassure him, it exposes him. Your presence doesn't stabilize him, it overwhelms him because it awakens emotions he cannot regulate. This is why avoidants often withdraw after moments of closeness. The high of being emotionally seen is immediately followed by a crash of fear. He cannot balance both at the same time. People misunderstand this and think avoidants don't want love. They do. They want it desperately. But they want it without vulnerability. They want connection without emotional exposure. They want intimacy without the risk of losing control. And that combination doesn't exist. So your safe love becomes the trigger not because it's wrong, but because it's real. He has lived his entire life believing that closeness equals danger. Then you came along and showed him closeness could feel like home, and that terrifies him more than any heartbreak ever could. Avoidants do not lack the ability to feel love. They lack the emotional capacity to times it, nurture it, sustain it, and stay present inside it. This is the part that confuses people the most. You see moments where he is soft, open, caring, connected, deeply present. You see glimpses of the man he could be if he leaned fully into the relationship. And those moments feel so real, so intimate, so powerful that you believe they are the foundation of the relationship. But for him, they are temporary states he cannot maintain. Not because he doesn't feel the connection, but because emotional intimacy for him is like standing in deep water. He can enter it for a moment, but he cannot breathe there. He has to retreat back to emotional land distance, distraction, isolation just to feel regulated again. Avoidants feel love intensely in short bursts. They experience the same warmth, closeness, excitement, and emotional pull that anyone else does. But they don't have the internal wiring to stay in that emotional space for long. The closer they get to you, the more their old wounds activate. The more intimate the connection becomes, the more their survival instincts scream at them to retreat. Their entire system is designed to avoid emotional overwhelm, so when love grows deeper, it clashes with their unconscious belief that closeness equals danger. This is why they seem so contradictory. One day they are warm, affectionate, deeply connected. The next day they are distant, cold, detached. One moment they open up, the next they shut down. One night they let you in completely. The next morning they act like it never happened. Those are not mixed signals, those are neurological patterns. Their nervous system cannot sustain vulnerability. so it collapses into avoidance the moment it feels too exposed. To you, this inconsistency feels like betrayal. To them, it feels like survival. They cannot sustain love because sustaining love requires vulnerability, emotional honesty, self-reflection, and the willingness to stay connected even when it feels uncomfortable. Avoidants were never taught how to do that. They learn to manage emotions by suppressing them. They learn to handle relationships by distancing themselves. They learn to protect their hearts by never letting anyone too close. So the very skills required to maintain real love are the exact skills their upbringing deprived them of. This is why they sabotage relationships. Not because they want to lose you, but because they don't know how to keep you in a healthy way. When you offer them consistent love, they feel pressure to respond in a way they don't have the emotional tools for. When you express your needs, they hear demands they fear they can't meet. When you become more vulnerable, they feel trapped, exposed, overwhelmed. Their emotional bandwidth collapses quickly, even when they genuinely care. Because caring takes effort their fear cannot sustain. They fall in love, but they fall out of intimacy. They attach to you, but they detach whenever the connection deepens. They want comfort, but run from closeness. They crave support, but fear being depended on. Their love is real, but their fear is stronger. And fear always wins unless healing begins. What hurts you most is that the fragments of love they give feel so genuine. The way they look at you when no one else is around, the way their voice softens at certain moments, the way their walls drop when they're tired, vulnerable, or feeling safe for a split second. Those moments convince you that if you just try harder, they will eventually learn to love you fully. But avoidants do not change because someone else loves them enough. They change only when they choose to confront their fear, and most never do. Their inability to sustain real love is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their emotional limitations. They are trapped in a cycle they don't understand. A cycle that makes them love in brief flashes, then disappear. A cycle that makes them pull you in just enough to feel connected, then push you away just enough to feel defended. A cycle that leaves you giving more while receiving less. They don't lack love, they lack emotional capacity. And until they choose healing, their love will always arrive in pieces, never whole. When an avoidant pulls away right when things feel good, right when the connection deepens, right when you finally start to feel close to them, it's never because of something you did wrong, it's because they felt something times two, right, asterisk. They withdraw at the very peak of intimacy, not because they want to leave you, but because they can't handle what's waking up inside of them. That moment when you think they're about to open their heart is the exact moment their fear takes over. It's the moment the connection crosses from comfortable to dangerous in their mind. And that shift is what triggers them to run. Avoidants have a very fragile threshold for emotional closeness. They can handle affection in small doses. They can handle intimacy in brief moments. They can handle vulnerability as long as it isn't too deep, too real, or too consistent. But the second they feel seen in a way they didn't prepare for, the second they sense you emotionally leaning in, the second they realize they are becoming important to you, something inside them panics. It's the same fear they've been carrying since childhood. The fear that closeness leads to loss, that attachment leads to pain, that being needed makes them responsible for emotions they don't know how to manage. When things get good, their emotional alarms go off. They start overthinking everything. They analyze your tone, your expectations, your potential to hurt them. They imagine scenarios where they disappoint you, lose control, or get trapped. They fear that their inability to communicate will eventually be exposed. So rather than risk the emotional mess they believe is coming, they retreat before it arrives. They protect themselves in advance, even if nothing is going wrong. They choose distance over vulnerability because distance is familiar, predictable, manageable. It keeps their emotions in check and gives them the illusion of safety. This is why they suddenly become cold after a beautiful moment, why they stop texting after an intimate conversation, why they act irritated after you get emotionally close, why they shut down right after you open up. That moment wasn't too much for them because of you, it was too much because of what it stirred inside times them asterisk. They felt the emotional pull, they felt the bond forming, they felt themselves getting attached in a way they can't regulate, And instead of embracing that feeling, they shut it down. They pull away to regain emotional control. They distance themselves to reset their nervous system. They retreat to a place where they don't feel overwhelmed. You internalize this as rejection, but they experience it as relief, not relief from you, but relief from their own emotional chaos. They believe that stepping back will calm the intensity, but what happens next is where the pain starts. You try to understand what you did wrong. You blame yourself for their sudden withdrawal. You start walking on eggshells, trying not to trigger them. You adjust your behavior, soften your truth, shrink your needs, all because they shut down after things felt good. But they aren't avoiding you, they're avoiding the version of themselves that feels vulnerable. They're avoiding the emotional intimacy that makes them feel exposed. They're avoiding the closeness that threatens to break their lifelong protective walls. They do not know how to stay present inside a relationship that feels serious, deep, or emotionally real. So they retreat every time the relationship starts to progress. Not because the relationship is flawed, but because times progress, times itself feels threatening. And the cruel twist is that the closer you get to their heart, the more they fear losing control. The more genuine your connection becomes, the more they fear failing you. The more love you offer, the more they fear not being able to return it in the same way. They feel undeserving, unprepared, overwhelmed, and instead of communicating that fear, they disappear. Their withdrawal is not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their fear of the very intimacy they desire. It's a defense mechanism, not a decision about your worth. It's their emotional wound speaking louder than their affection. When things get good, they don't shut down because they don't care. They shut down because caring exposes the parts of them they've spent their entire lives trying to hide. No matter how deeply you love an avoidant, no matter how much patience you pour into them, no matter how gentle, understanding, and emotionally safe you try to be, you cannot love them into healing. You cannot soften wounds you did not create. You cannot replace the emotional development they never received. And you cannot carry the relationship for two people, not without breaking yourself in the process. This is the hardest truth people learn in these connections. Your love may be powerful, but their fear is stronger. Your consistency may be comforting, but their avoidance is more familiar. Your emotional presence may feel safe, but their childhood wiring interprets it as danger. So you end up trying to rescue someone who is unconsciously fighting you, not because they want to hurt you, but because their nervous system believes it's protecting them. You cannot love someone past their coping mechanisms. Avoidants survive by detaching, shutting down, and running from emotional discomfort. These strategies are not choices, they're survival patterns. They were formed long before you, shaped by early relationships where their needs were ignored, emotions were dismissed, or closeness felt unsafe. You are not fighting their current behavior. You are fighting decades of emotional conditioning, and no amount of loyalty, kindness, or empathy can override patterns that were built to protect them from exactly the kind of connection you're offering. This is why you always end up doing more. You initiate the deep conversations. You repair the tension after conflict. You regulate the emotional energy. You carry the vulnerability, the honesty, the accountability. You create the safety they benefit from, but do not contribute to. You become the emotional anchor of the relationship, while they become the emotional absence. And it drains you, slowly at first, then all at once. You begin to feel exhausted by trying to reach someone who keeps retreating. You start questioning your worth because someone emotionally blocked cannot meet your needs. You shrink your truth so you don't overwhelm them. You silence your feelings so you don't scare them away. You stop asking for the basics because you've learned that the basics overwhelm them. You call it understanding, but in reality, it's self-abandonment disguised as compassion. And here is the harsh reality. You cannot outlove someone's trauma. Trauma demands personal responsibility. It demands self-awareness. It demands intentional healing. You cannot do the inner work for them. You can inspire someone who wants to heal, but you cannot transform someone who avoids healing. Avoidants rarely change because meaningful change requires facing the very emotions they've spent their entire lives running from. And love, as powerful as it is, cannot make someone confront fears they're determined to avoid. What hurts most is that you see their potential. You feel the spark beneath their distance. You see the softness behind their defenses. You feel the connection they're afraid to claim. You believe that if you just love them enough, they will finally feel safe. But that belief keeps you trapped. The more you try to love them into healing, the more they retreat. The more you offer, the less they feel they can reciprocate. The more you give, the heavier the emotional responsibility feels to them. Because accepting love means accepting vulnerability, and vulnerability is the one thing they fear more than losing you. Your love cannot replace their emotional courage. Your patience cannot replace their self-awareness. Your loyalty cannot replace their willingness to grow. You cannot be both their partner times and times their healer. You cannot hold their wounds and your own heart at the same time. You cannot sacrifice your needs hoping they will eventually rise to meet you. Because here is the truth no one wants to admit. You can show them what healthy love looks like, but you cannot force them to feel worthy of it. And, until they choose healing for themselves, you will always end up loving them alone, carrying the weight of a relationship that was never meant to be sustained by one person. The most painful truth about loving an avoidant is this: if they don't choose healing, if they don't choose self-awareness, if they don't choose to confront their fear, you will always end up loving them alone. It doesn't matter how much potential the connection holds, how deeply you feel for them, how strong the emotional pull is, or how many magical moments you shared. Love cannot survive when only one person is emotionally participating. And avoidance, unless they consciously decide to change, will always participate just enough to keep you hoping, but never enough to truly meet you. This is the part that breaks people the most. You see glimpses of who they could be, the softness behind their guard, the warmth behind their coldness, the moments where they open up and let you into their emotional world. Those moments feel real because they are real, but they are temporary. They are flashes, not foundations. And because those flashes feel so genuine, so intimate, so hopeful, you cling to the belief that if you just stay patient a little longer, if you love them a little more, if you hurt a little deeper, they will finally meet you halfway. But they don't. Because without healing, avoidants always return to the same emotional baseline: numbness, distance, withdrawal. Avoidance cannot truly build a lasting relationship because relationships require sustained vulnerability, not occasional vulnerability. They require consistent presence, not half-hearted efforts whenever fear quiets down. They require emotional reciprocity, not one person giving everything while the other hides behind a wall of self-protection. Avoidants do not choose distance to hurt you. They choose it because it feels safer than closeness. They choose emotional withdrawal not because they don't love you, but because love demands a level of self-exposure they've never developed the capacity for. And no matter how much you understand this, no matter how much compassion you have, no matter how many excuses you make for them in your mind, the truth doesn't change. If they don't choose to face their fear, the relationship will always collapse under the weight of your effort alone. You don't realize it at first. You think you're helping by being patient. You think you're supporting them by lowering your expectations. You think you're protecting the relationship by avoiding difficult conversations. You think you're keeping peace by swallowing your needs. But slowly, you disappear inside the connection. You forget your own emotional desires. You forget your standards. You forget your worth. You begin accepting crumbs and calling them love because you're terrified of losing the one person who already chose emotional distance. And the tragedy is not just that they can't love you properly, it's that you start losing pieces of yourself, trying to earn a love they are not capable of giving consistently. When they don't choose healing, you become two people in one relationship. You play your role, the emotionally available one, and you play theirs, the emotional anchor they should have been. You soothe your own hurt after they disappear. You rationalize their behavior so you don't walk away. You take responsibility for their triggers, their fears, their shutdowns. You love for both of you. But relationships cannot survive when one person is drowning and the other is holding both of you above water. Love cannot grow when only one person is emotionally present. Connection cannot deepen when one person's heart is open and the other's is locked behind a lifetime of fear. Avoidance cannot meet you where you stand unless they choose to heal the part of themselves that is stuck in emotional childhood. And healing is not passive. Healing is not silent. Healing is not accidental. Healing requires them to confront the exact feelings they avoid: fear, intimacy, vulnerability, emotional dependence. Most avoidants never do this work, not because they're incapable, but because avoidance feels safer than growth. That's why you end up loving them alone. Not because they didn't have feelings, not because the connection wasn't real, not because you did anything wrong, but because love is a choice. And fear is also a choice. If they keep choosing fear, you will remain the only one choosing love. And no matter how strong you are, no matter how patient you are, no matter how deep your heart goes, you cannot build a future with someone who refuses to show up in the present. That is the truth that hurts the most, and the truth that finally sets you free.